stream. My name is Jeremy Crow. I have been an occultist, a serious occultist, for over 30 years now. And the last 25 years or so, I have considered myself to be a Luciferian, specifically a Gnostic Luciferian. And this evening, I wanted to do an Ask Me Anything, an AMA. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask me, feel free to put it in the live chat and I will talk about it. I'll try and answer your question as best I can. We are accepting super chats as well if you wanted to financially support the channel, but you can also just click the like button, and that's another way of supporting the channel. It helps the algorithm know that this is valuable content. But before we get into that, one of the things that I like to do on my live streams is start it off with a divination of some sort. And lately, what I've been doing is bibliomancy using the I Ching. And my favorite edition of that, my favorite translation, is the I Ching the Oracle by Benabel Wen. She is a YouTuber. Check out her channel. This also has information on esoteric Taoism. It's over 900 pages, so check it out. I'll put a link in the description or something later. But let's see what we get. I'm gonna just open up the book at a random hexagram, and then we'll see what the oracle says about it. Hi, B. Okay, let's see here. All right. Okay, so we ended up with hexagram 59, making waves. This one right here. So this one ended up being wind over water. So you break it down. A hexagram, if you're not aware, in the I Ching is 6 lines stacked on top of each other, starting at the bottom going up. And each line is either a yin line, which is a broken line, or a yang line, which is unbroken. And you can also break it down into trigrams, which are stacks of 3 lines. And each of the trigrams has its own meaning. And so if you understand the meaning of the trigrams, you can start to kind of understand what the hexagram is going to mean. So in this case, we have water at the bottom, the water trigram, and then wind above it. Just gonna put on my glasses here so I can read a little better. All right. Making waves. And the oracle says, a very important task is at hand, and to make waves, you will be the driver of the forces. Like wind breaking waves, a voice of reason, virtue, and compassion rises to reform what is broken and severe. Omen of one with a strong sense of purpose, who understands exactly what must be done to make waves and create necessary change. Set aside personal interest and pursue public interest. Heaven seeks you as a vessel to carry forth its mission. Dispel what has been oppressive. Honor the gods and ancestors to receive further insight, prayer, petition, meditation, and music. Very interesting. Now, if you're aware of how the I Ching works, you can go into each individual line. There's 6 lines again. and you can go a lot further into it. But for the purposes of this divination at the beginning of the live stream, just I just read the oracle. And there are ways of going through and deriving the hexagram line by line instead of just doing a bibliomancy like I did. And one of the more common ways of doing that is to throw coins. And if you want to check out an example of how that's done, the there's a few live streams in my channel. Some of the more recent live streams that I've done have given an example of that. Like the Occult Oshawa video has an example, and I go in depth on how that goes. There's another one that is called Learn I Ching with Me, and that one also does an example reading, and it goes in depth on how to do that using coins. Beyond Zebra, howdy. OB is Bear. Cool. I'm glad you managed to pop in. G.A. Morris, hello. How are you tonight? I'm glad you could pop in too. All right. So, what do you guys want to talk about? We can talk about whatever you want. Um, that that oracle actually was quite pertinent to me in what I've been working with lately. Occult Prepper, welcome. Glad you could pop in. That particular oracle really spoke to me actually because I have been working on making contact with a particular entity and contemplating some of the ideas that came up in that oracle. I'm wondering if it resonated with anyone else as well. G.A. Morris says your Masonic experience and your apron. Well, my apron isn't here in the room, but yeah, I was involved in a Masonic order many years ago, and I was involved for about 6 years or so, heavily involved, and I wasn't a member of a mainstream lodge. I didn't join one of the standard ancient free and accepted right or any of the mainstream male only lodges. I didn't join that. I ended up joining what a lot of mainstream Masons would refer to as clandestine Masonry or fringe Masonry. And the reason that I did that was my main interest in joining Freemasonry wasn't networking, it wasn't doing charitable works. It was the esoteric side of things that I wanted to explore the rich symbolism and meaning, the esoteric meaning behind the rituals and ceremonies of Freemasonry and that sort of thing. So, a mainstream traditional lodge that you find in like any city and a lot of small towns in the world, those are not nearly as interested in the esoteric side of things. You might find a brother or two that share your passion for the deep esoteric meaning behind the symbols and rituals, but it's not super common. And even it can even be hostile to those ideas in some lodges depending on the composition of your local lodge. And so I didn't want to get involved with that. So I ended up joining a co-Masonic order. And that was the one that I joined was called the American Federation of Human Rights, which I believe well, not recently. I believe since I stopped being a member, I believe they changed their name to Universal Co-Masonry, I think. Pretty sure. And they work the Scottish Rite degrees, and they also have a few York degrees that they also include in there in certain spots to kind of flesh out the whole system. And these degrees that they practice are slightly modified with esoteric elements that are inspired by the Theosophical Society. It's mostly the same, but there are a few differences. So that's what I was involved with, and I went through and roughly each year or two, I went up to the next degree. And I was recognized. Eventually, I was raised to the third degree, is what they call it, of Master Mason. And I also ended up affiliating with the ancient and primitive rite of Memphis Mizraim, which was also co-Masonic in the sense that they accepted men and women equally. And it was also focused on the esoteric aspect of Freemasonic ritual and symbolism. And I affiliated at the Master Mason degree with them as well. And I helped form a triangle, which is a proto lodge in Toronto. And we operated using the French ritual for that. And the apron. So there are multiple aprons, but um, yeah, they have. It's similar to the symbol for Gmail, where it's a kind of a rectangle and it's got a border and it's got a triangle kind of coming down from the top, like an envelope, right? And sometimes they're embellished with different symbols. I believe that the one that I used most often, the apron that I used most often in ritual was had rosettes, these stylized rosettes on two of them on the bottom, and I can't remember what was on the in the triangle, the downward pointing triangle that is kind of a little flap. So you can imagine a rectangle apron and then a triangle flap down above the front of it. And what else was interesting about the apron? It was made of lamb skin. And in the Universal Co-Masonry, the one that I actually received all of the various different, the 3 degrees, the 3 main Blue Lodge degrees, we were the rest of the garb that you would wear, the rest of the ritual garb that you would wear was all white. And in the ancient and primitive rite of Memphis Mizraim, we would wear black robes with the apron on top of that. So it was kind of opposite in that sense. And for men in the Universal Co-Masonry, we would wear white dress pants, white shoes, even white socks, and a white tie. And women would wear a white gown, basically. And as I said, in Memphis Mizraim, we would wear a black robe with the apron on top. And let me see, was there another comment? G.A. Morris said Rosicrucian. No, it's not Rosicrucian, but it's similar, I guess you could say, related, adjacent, you could say. Rosicrucianism is, there are connections. There is a Rosicrucian order for Master Masons called Societas Rosicruciana, and then you would usually have the name of the location or country. And the original one was in Anglica, which was in England. So Societas Rosicruciana in Anglica. And there are other ones as well. Like there's one for the United States, and I believe there's one for Scotland, and some other places like that would had a branch of the Rosicrucian Society that was open to master masons, typically. Now, an interesting thing that happened there was there were some members of the SRIA, Societas Rosicruciana in Anglica, that ended up deciding that they wanted to open up the teachings to a wider audience, not just men, basically. And they also wanted to practice more explicitly occult rituals and practices. So they formed what was called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And the inner order for that, which began at the fifth degree, called Adeptus Minor, that inner order was specifically Rosicrucian. The first part of it was more hermetic and Kabbalistic and that sort of thing, whereas the inner order was specifically Rosicrucian. Dr. Zero says, wanted to recommend Book of Splendors by Eliphas Levi, especially the Baphomet section. Also, hello. Hi, Dr. Zero. Book of Splendors. Yeah, Eliphas Levi is pretty cool. He has a book called, well, the English translation of it is typically called Transcendental Magic, but the original was written in French and it was, I believe, Ritual et Dogma de la Haute Magie, which means dogma and ritual of high magic. And in that, he has a section on Baphomet as well. And he has the classic image of the goat headed, you know, goat legged figure that has the as above, so below, solve a coagula, that sort of thing. And that book, actually, Transcendental Magic, it has the earliest reference that I could find to Gnostic Luciferianism. And yeah, there wasn't really any other book that I'm aware of that talked about Gnostic Luciferianism before I started talking about it in the year 2000, I think. I started posting articles online about what I had identified as a current that was underlying, that you could find if you knew how to tease out the details in the Western esoteric tradition. You could find it. I refer to it as a bronze thread that you could find underlying it. What do we see here? Oh, Verm. Hello, Verm. Says recently bought that book. Haven't taken a crack at it yet. Yeah, it's a pretty heavy book. I mean, there's a lot of material in it. So just I would recommend just take your time with it, read a bit, and let yourself process it for a bit, and then read a bit more, and then let yourself process it. Another interesting connection to Luciferianism and Freemasonry is The Lost Keys of Freemasonry by Manly P. Hall. And in one part of that book, he mentions, what did he say? Something like the seething power of Lucifer in your hands or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, but He mentions Lucifer in that book, and I think that it's in reference to the third degree of Master Mason. And actually, it was after I had become a third degree Master Mason in co-masonry that I realized that I was a Luciferian. And partly it was due to contemplating the symbolism of Freemasonry that I had encountered in the rituals that I had participated in. And eventually it all kind of coalesced, and it just kind of clicked in my mind. And I understood what the word Lucifer really meant. And it just kind of burned in my mind and soul. And I thought, I am a Luciferian. And I've considered myself a Luciferian ever since. So, yeah, that word Lucifer, if you're not aware, is a Latin word, and it means, literally translates into English as bringer of light or light bearer. And the ancient Roman people who spoke Latin, they used that word Lucifer to refer to Venus, the planet Venus, when it was the last bright star like object in the night sky before the sun rose. It would be the last one, typically, with any other star like celestial body would have faded out, and Venus would remain until just before the sun rose. And they referred to that as Lucifer, that particular phenomenon as Lucifer, meaning the bringer of light, the light of day, the light of the sun. So it became a herald of the light. It would call forth, symbolically call forth or signal the coming of the light of day. And that's why they referred to it as Lucifer. Now, later, that word got used in the Latin edition of the Christian Bible, and that would be the Vulgate. So they took the original texts that were in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek, and they translated the whole thing from the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they translated the whole thing um, into Latin. And in some cases, in certain multiple places, they translated certain words as Lucifer. And that includes, of course, the iconic reference in Isaiah, but there are other places where that word gets used. Job, it gets used a couple times, I believe. It gets used in Revelation at least once, and it gets used in the second book of Peter. And it's interesting because in the second book of Peter, there is a passage where it says that, I'm paraphrasing here, but it says that we have to rely on the words of the wise people and elders and prophets that came before us until such time as Lucifer rises in our own hearts. Presumably, then we would have our own direct source of knowledge. Now, typically, that passage is interpreted as a reference to Jesus when they say Lucifer in that passage. They Christian theologians generally believe that that was a reference to Jesus. Now, when that got translated into English by the commission or the committee that was formed by King James to produce the King James edition of the Bible, that wasn't that was translated into Daystar, I think is was what they usually use in that passage. Whereas in Isaiah, they left it untranslated from the Latin because they were using the Latin edition and translated that into English. They didn't go back to the original sources, to not very much anyways. They mostly just looked at the Latin Vulgate and then translated that into English for the King James version of the Bible. And for some reason, when Lucifer shows up in Isaiah, they just left that Latin word untranslated. So if you ever wonder how a Latin word ended up in a book that was originally written in Aramaic, I believe, that's how. Because it got translated into Latin, and then when it was translated into English, they left that word, which I believe was uh, Halal Ben something or other. And in that would be the Hebrew word actually, not the Aramaic, but the Hebrew word halal, um, son of the morning. They would say halal. Um, that got translated into the word Lucifer in the Vulgate, and then when they translated it in English, they left that untranslated. Now imagine what would have happened if they had also left, or instead of, let's say they translated that as Daystar or Morning Star. Let's say they translated that as Morning Star. And in the second book of Peter, they had left that instance of the word Lucifer untranslated into the English. There would have been a completely different understanding of the word Lucifer today in modern Christian folklore. It wouldn't be associated with the devil because that wouldn't make sense. Why would they say rely on the words of the prophets until Lucifer rises in your hearts, if that meant the devil, right? So that would have put a completely different spin on the whole thing if they had made that translation choice, a slightly different translation choice. Let me see here. Bear asked, how much of the Luciferian 11 points of power were your input? Well, the 11 points of power were originally found in the Wisdom of Iosphros, which is a book that I collaborated on with Michael W. Ford. And it was the founding, or it was the major founding document of the Greater Church of Lucifer, which we renamed later on the Assembly of Light Bearers. And Michael and I and Hope Marie Ford, the three of us were co-presidents, equal co-presidents of that organization, the Greater Church of Lucifer. And when we put together the book, The Wisdom of Iosphros, Michael wrote the 11 Points of Power and asked me what I thought of it. And I said, they're pretty good. It's a pretty decent set of ideas to contemplate. Now, I noticed that a lot of people nowadays, and so we just, I just let him, I didn't object. I said, yeah, that's a pretty decent set of ideas to contemplate for somebody who is learning about Luciferianism and that sort of thing. Now, these points of power were never supposed to be a dogmatic set of rules or commandments or anything like that. Like I said, it was supposed to be uh, a list of concepts that you could think about and contemplate and decide whether or not you agreed with them or not. It wasn't intended to be this dogmatic set of rules. And I noticed a lot of people talking about the 11 points of power as if those are things that they need to believe in if they want to consider themselves a true Luciferian. And that wasn't the intention for that at all. The intention for that, like I said, was things to contemplate. And you weren't expected, even if you were a member of the GCOL, Greater Church of Lucifer, even if you were a member of the GCOL, you weren't expected to agree with all the points. It was just kind of a basic um, guideline where you could. These were common ideas that not all of them, most people didn't agree with all of them. Most people would agree with maybe about 8 or 9, and maybe they had some minor or major disagreements with certain other parts, but it wasn't supposed to be dogmatic. And I see people treating it that way, and that's not, the way of Luciferianism. Luciferianism is supposed to be about you deciding what it means to you. And the 11 points of power were a way for you to explore those ideas and give you things to contemplate and think about and think, okay, well, these are some ideas that some other Luciferians believe. And Michael W. Ford in particular, uh, it was his opinion that those were very common ideas within Luciferianism as he saw it, and I didn't see a major issue with it. I didn't agree with all 11 exactly as written, but that was one of his contributions to the book, and I thought that that was fine. That you know, he could write what his opinion was. So Um, yeah, I had input in the sense that he ran it by me before we published the book, but I didn't write them. And I think that if I went back in time, I would have tried to encourage him to put a disclaimer in there, saying basically what I just said, that so that people don't take it as a dogmatic set of rules to be a that you have to believe in to be a Luciferian. Um, so I think I would have wanted it to be a bit more clear in that book. But then after the Greater Church of Lucifer Assembly of Light Bearers became open source and relatively inactive, Michael took the material that he had written for Wisdom of Yosfros and um, then he rewrote it and expanded upon it for the book that's now out there called Apotheosis. So I wrote a chapter for Wisdom of Yosfros uh, describing the new Luciferian era. That was my major contribution to that book, as well as some input on some of the other material. But I didn't write the other material. I had some input, but I wrote the chapter on the new Luciferian era and um, the other the other co-presidents of the Greater Church of Lucifer had some input in feedback before we published it. But that was the one that I wrote, and I took their feedback into consideration as well. But yeah, so that's where that came from. Sean Hoffman's welcome said, just jumped in and I don't know if you already covered this, but can you share what your daily practice with Lucifer is like? Yeah, so my daily practice with Lucifer, the main thing is that I seek to resonate with the light bearer archetype. And by that, I mean that I seek to obtain access to hidden and forbidden knowledge. And hidden is another word that means occult. And but it also, I mean, in the broader sense of the term as well, that I seek wisdom and knowledge that is obscure or difficult to obtain, or even hidden or twisted or guarded. And then I want to make that information available to those who are looking for it, especially if that knowledge, those truths, can undermine a system of power that is twisting knowledge, withholding knowledge, and exploiting people's ignorance. If I can undermine a system of power that is keeping knowledge from people by sharing the truth in some way, then that's even better. So that to me is the embodiment of the light bearer archetype. And if you can embody the light bearer archetype in your own unique way, in your life and in your circumstances, then you have earned the title of light bearer or Lucifer in your own way. So that is how I connect with the energy of Lucifer, is by seeking to embody that light bearer archetype in my own unique way. And doing these live streams is one way that I try and share knowledge with the world and make it available to people who are looking for it. That's the main focus of the work that I do. But I also do a lot of work with lucid dreaming. So I seek to achieve full awareness of the state that I'm in at any given time and the implications of that. And that includes when I'm asleep and dreaming, that I want to be aware or lucid of the fact that I'm asleep and dreaming. And then when you are aware of that, when you are lucid of what state you are in and the true nature of it, then that opens up all sorts of possibilities of exploration. And a lot of my work involves uh, lucid dreaming and lucid living as well, lucid waking experience. So I bring that lucid awareness into my daily so called waking experience, which I also think of as a type of dream state as well. So those are the major things that I do in terms of my esoteric practice. But I also do ritual here and there. I don't necessarily do ritual every single day. At one point, I did when I was really learning it and getting practice with it. I don't do ritual every single day anymore, but I do ritual. Um, I still do ritual on occasion, especially on special occasions. Ken three times says, what are your thoughts on the Kabbalistic cross? Also, I'm glad to be in your stream for the first time, and I'm happy to meet you IRL. Yeah, that was great meeting you, Ken, last month um, at the event, the local event. That was pretty cool. My thoughts on the Kabbalistic cross. I've done it lots of times, probably well over 100 times. When I was doing ritual daily, um, I probably have done the Kabbalistic cross several hundred times actually, because it's part of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And I think it's well written. It's a very well written component of that ritual, and it can be done on its own, and I would sometimes even just do it on its own. It's almost like a miniature middle pillar ritual, but it doesn't just include the middle pillar. It includes Gebura and Chesed as well. Now, I don't actually practice Kabbalistic based ritual anymore. I have gone back to a more ancient source that is the Chaldean, which is basically Mediterranean, Babylonian, and Sumerian based. And the Chaldean ladder of lights kind of takes place of the um, the tree of knowledge in the Kabbalah. So I don't really do the Kabbalistic stuff anymore because I, I just don't want to base my ritual on Kabbalah anymore. It's a system rooted in the Abrahamic traditions. And although I do find value in looking at those Abrahamic, the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic paradigms from a Gnostic perspective, but I don't focus on those. I try and focus on other forms because I find, you know what, I found that the occult, the Western esoteric tradition in particular, was saturated with Kabbalism. Even the left hand path uh, workings would involve the Klapoth, which is Kabbalah. It's a Kabbalistic system. And I just didn't want to be based on Abrahamic stuff. I didn't want to have that as my main core of my workings. Now, like I said, I do find value in that if you observe it and explore it from a Gnostic perspective, but I didn't want that to be my foundation, my base. So I have explored. I used to do that. Well, when I first initially started about 31 years ago, I was practicing a lot of Kabbalistic based stuff because I considered myself right hand path at the time. And I was coming out of Roman Catholic Christianity. And so that was like a bridge for me. The Kabbalistic right hand path type ritual magic, Hermeticism, and Gnosticism. But then eventually I kind of moved past that. But if you are interested in Kabbalah, and especially if you are considering yourself right hand path, then the Kabbalistic cross is an excellent ritual. Although I don't consider myself right hand path anymore, and I don't, I don't work with Kabbalah very much anymore either. I try not to utilize it if I can avoid it. Wraith says, greetings, just shared the session. Oh, very cool. Thank you so much. And glad to see you here. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that I am doing a private meeting, a casual hangout actually, online for members of the Novus Ordo Luciferi after we finish this live stream here. So I do see there's a few more questions, but after we deal with some of those questions, I'm going to wrap it up. And then I'm going to open up the private meeting for members of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. Now, if you are interested in participating in that, you can join the Novus Ordo Luciferi by going to novusordoluciferi.org and scrolling down and hit get started, and there'll be a link to the Patreon. Or you can just go to patreon.com/Novus Ordo Luciferi, which is NOV, no, Novus, NOVUSORDOLUCE, LUC, Lucifer, LUCIFERI. Sorry. But you can look it up. Novus Ordo Luciferi, and join at the $5 tier or above, and that'll unlock the most recent post in the Patreon, and it will have a link to the private meeting that we're going to have shortly after this live stream ends. And let me see some more comments here. And that's a way to financially support this channel and everything that I'm doing publicly, like this live stream and these live streams that I do, as well as the teachings that I'm providing to members of the NOL, which constitute a system of occultism that I've developed that is not based on Kabbalah. And I call it Luciferian alchemy. It's something that I've developed over the course of my 30-year career as a serious practicing occultist. Luciferian alchemy. So if you're interested in learning Luciferian alchemy, I would highly recommend. It's only $5 American a month to participate, and you get access to over 50 hours of recorded video content. You get access to the private hangouts. You get access to live taught courses, um, and all the written material as well. And you get instant access to all of that. You don't have to go through tiers of degrees that unlock a bit at a time. You get instant access to all of that for the $5 a month. Let me see here. Bear said, agreed that dogma and Luciferianism doesn't really go together. J. Morris said, I felt the same. I was a member of the GCUL in Spring, Texas. Oh, cool. Yeah. In 2015, the very first Luciferian church or temple physical building was open in the world, as far as I'm aware. And I've seen another group uh, claiming that they were the first, but that they did that in like 2023, I think. And so this was many years before that. We had a temple, a physical Luciferian temple that was open to the public to come in and participate in our meetings and rituals, and that was held in Spring, Texas, under the auspices of the Greater Church of Lucifer. And our lease ended up getting um, not renewed because the owner of the building was getting death threats and constant harassment, so they didn't renew our lease after the year was up, unfortunately. So if we had had the funds to purchase a building, then we wouldn't have had to worry about that. Supernova says, "Hey Jeremy, hey Supernova." Wraith gave a super chat. Thank you so much, $10. That's super appreciated. I really appreciate that, Wraith. That really helps me go do this work, and that's how I'm able to do this type of work, is through contributions like that, and through the Patreon. I focus my this is my main focus, is doing this work of sharing occult knowledge and Luciferian principles and ideas and practices to people who are looking for it. What did you say here? When working with deities, is it a better balance to work with both masculine and feminine in one session or separately? I would say separately. I would give the deity or entity that you are working with your full attention in that session. Don't split it between more than one at the time. If you are specifically working with an entity, just work with that entity in that session. And then you can do another session with a different entity if you are working with multiple entities in your practice. Unless you are doing something like the Great Rite, which you can find examples of in modern neo paganism, where you have a masculine and a feminine deity that are lovers. Then sometimes there are ways of working with both at the same time, and you can look that up, the Great Rite. But for the most part, and the Great Rite is more of a group ritual, or at least a ritual done with at least two people. And so each of the two main practitioners or operators of that ritual will each focus on one of those deities. So in that, even with that, one person is focusing on one deity, and the other person is focusing on the other one. So I would say separately. I would usually do it separately unless you're doing something like the Great Rite. Verm says, a question in relation to the LBRP, Lesser Banishing Ritual of Pentagram, which is a Golden Dawn ritual. If you were here at the beginning of the live stream, I talked about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. That's the main ritual that they would give new initiates, and they would do that for a full year before they would move on to other things in the original version of the order, at least. When facing the four directions, I've seen both mentions of facing the walls closest to the associated direction as well as just the four cardinal directions. My home's walls aren't exactly directly set toward each direction, and I was wondering which method you found most success with. Um, if they're close, I would do the wall, but if it's kind of wonky or like on a big angle, then I would do the actual direction. But if it's close, I would do the wall. Um, Bear says private meeting makes me think someone's in trouble. Harkens back to my school days. No, just an exclusive hangout for people who are dedicated to learning um, Luciferian alchemy in particular, the system of occultism that I've developed that's unique and doesn't rely on Kabbalah. It's more alchemy based, and I it's based on not just Western Hermetic alchemy, but also Eastern forms of alchemy that you would find in Taoism in particular. So a combination. It's kind of a fusion of Taoist internal alchemy and Western Hermetic alchemy, both lab and inner versions of that alchemy. Ken says, yeah, absolutely. I get what you're saying on the occult scene being oversaturated with Kabbalism. I was going to mention the middle pillar as well, too. I think you're doing great for not conforming. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, the middle pillar is an excellent ritual if you are working with um, right hand path God forms in the Kabbalah, but I don't anymore. At one point, I did. And it's a very powerful ritual if you are working within that kind of paradigm. Bryce, welcome, Bryce. Bryce says, "Do you think heaven and hell actually exist?" Not in the way that most people think of it, no. But maybe something along those lines, but not the way that they're portrayed typically. Wraith said, "Thank you for answering my questions. No problem. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing here. That's what I wanted to do to talk about these things and share with you guys the knowledge that I have and make it available to people who are looking for that knowledge. And so these Ask Me Anythings it's a perfect vehicle for sharing that knowledge because you're actively asking me these questions and I'm sharing my uh, experience and perspective. Worm said it's kind of northwest situation, not quite northwest as the corners of the room, but close. I would just go with your intuition, whatever feels right, and you can try both. You can try it both ways and see for yourself. That would be ultimately what I would recommend. Try both, and then see what feels best for you in particular. But in general, in my experience, I've found that if the direction is close to the wall, I would just use the wall. But otherwise, if it's not really that close, then I would try and do the true direction. Bear says, "While I may go to the meeting, kind of shy about showing my face, you don't have to put your camera on. If you do decide to join the private NOL members hangout that we're going to start in just a few minutes here, um, you don't have to put your camera on. You don't have to put your mic on. You can just sit and lurk and listen to what other people are saying and talking about. There's no obligation to participate. You can just kind of chill out and see what everybody else is saying if you're shy. But it would be nice if you did pop in and even at least turn your mic on and say hi. But there's no pressure. You don't have to do that. You can just chill and hang out. And there's people that just chill and listen to what everybody else is talking about, and they don't really actively participate, but they still show up and they hang out and they absorb, and that's totally fine. There's no obligation, like I said. Sean Hoffman's $10 super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Sean. You said I've studied Kabbalah under Bri Baruch in Israel, and the truth is that it has nothing to do with magic or occultism. It is the Torah as practiced before the fall of the Second Temple. Yeah, there are a lot of different versions of Kabbalah out there, and the original Jewish Kabbalah is different than the Hermetic Kabbalah, you could say, which is the Western esoteric tradition having picked up wisdom from the Kabbalah and kind of translated it into esoteric concepts that are associated with magic and occultism. But yeah, if you go back to the more pure forms of Kabbalah, like you said, it looks a little different, doesn't it? Bear said, "Oh, I'm good at lurking." Wraith said, "Great point." Okay, well, um, I'm a little bit. I did say that I was going to start the private meeting about 10 minutes ago, but you had some really good questions, and I was really vibing with you guys that showed up. Everybody here who showed up, and so I wanted to really address all the things that came up. And I really appreciate the super chats from Wraith and from Sean. Thank you so much for supporting the channel in that way financially. Like I said, another way to support the channel is by subscribing to the Patreon. And if you join at the $5 level or above, you can unlock that most recent post, which has a link to the meeting that we're going to start in just a couple minutes. And we can continue this conversation if you are a member. Um, it won't be recorded. It's just a casual hangout. Another way that you can support this channel without having to support it financially is if you click the like button. I would really appreciate if you enjoyed this video, if you stayed until this point, if you are live or if you are watching this as an archive. If you hit that like button, that's one of the best ways you can support the channel. If you hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell, then you'll get notifications when I do go live or if I have a video scheduled, then you'll get that notification. But another way to get those notifications of live streams upcoming is to join the Patreon. Even as a free follower of the Patreon, you'll get those notifications of upcoming live streams. You don't have to do a paid one. You can join it as a free follower of the Patreon, and you'll still get those notifications of upcoming live streams. Another thing that you can do is you can join the Luciferian Research Society Discord server. And often I will announce if I'm going live in there as well. And that's a free, the Discord server is also free, and you can join there. And there are people who are on various different paths, Luciferians, Satanists, people who are in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, of course, but there's also people who are in the Order of Phosphorus. There are people who are Setians. There are Sinistrists, people who are part of the sect of the Horned God. There are a lot of solo practitioners, people who are left-hand path practitioners and adjacent. And it's a pretty big community. I think it's getting close to 500 members at this point. And so if you want to participate in the wider community, then I would highly recommend joining the Luciferian Research Society Discord server. And after this, later on, if you come back to this video later, I'll have all the links that I described before in this video, including the link to the I Ching book that I'm using, as well as to the Patreon, to the Discord server. I'll have an invite link to the Discord server as well. So if you wanted to join that, just come back to this video later and check the description, or I'll also do a pinned comment as well, which has all those links. So yeah, like this video so you can find it again, and you can come back for those links tomorrow Or if you're watching this as an archive, they're probably already in there. So, on that note, I really appreciate everybody who stopped in. Thanks again for everybody who clicked like on this video. Thank you to Wraith and Sean for the super chats. And if you are a member of the Novus Ordo Luciferi, if you just joined even, then I'll be seeing you in just a moment. Oh, um, Captain Obvious said, is this a test or is this like a live ASMR or is this like a practice? No, it's an Ask Me Anything. So, but I have heard a lot of people say that the sound of my voice is kind of like an ASMR to them. But no, it's an Ask Me Anything. So, but it's done now. So, if you do want to continue this conversation, then join the Patreon at the $5 or above level. It'll unlock the most recent post, which will have the link to the meeting that's going to take place in just a moment now. And thanks again for everybody who came. And until next time, everyone, stay lucid.